And so covert narcissists can be really good at presenting themselves as just the guy or the girl next door that's friendly and pleasant and all, and they know the game, and they can present a pretty good front, at least as you're getting to know them. But then it goes back to the notion that what you see isn't necessarily what you get, because over time, in their friendliness and pleasantness and all, you begin realizing I'm being played here.
For covert narcissists, niceness isn't genuine, it's a front because they need you to believe there's somebody they're not, so when they abuse you, you never see it coming. My guest today, Dr. Les Carter, is a best-selling author and psychotherapist who spent over 40 years in private practice. His YouTube channel, Surviving Narcissism, has generated over 85 million views, where his calm, genuine style helps you make sense of the crazy making that is narcissistic abuse. And today, Dr. Carter reveals the exact subtle mind games covert narcissists play, so you can start seeing them in real time instead of being blinded by them. Let's get into it. Dr. Carter, thank you so much for joining me today on the Restoring Resilience podcast.
Oh, Chelsey, well, and thank you for inviting me. I've known of your work now, and I'm so pleased to be on the podcast with you.
Yeah, you just were showing me you got my book, which I was so honored by. I'm like, oh my goodness, that means a lot. So I'm very excited to have you.
Yeah.
I'm always so curious, what drew you to this work? Is there a personal story, an event that drew you to specialize in narcissism and toxic relationships?
Yeah, it took me a while to get there. And I'm in my 70s now, and I finished my doctorate when I was 26, and so I was a young buck and all. And I had a supervisor that had in my doctoral internship that had specialized in anger management. And so under his tutelage and all, I wound up going into there, and the whole, and we'll get into this as we go deeper into our topic today. But his thing is, if you want to really understand where a person is in their personal maturity and in their approach towards relationships, just watch how they manage conflict. And the emotion that's most commonly experienced in conflict is going to be anger of some form. And so I began as an early therapist doing a lot of anger workshops. And when I say a lot, like 6 times a year, I'd have 6-week courses. And so I really enjoyed doing all of that. And as the years went by, I would find myself commenting on topics like the angry person has a lot of control issues. They have a lot of hidden codependency issues. They themselves are passing along what was given to them, and so there's probably some sort of trauma or abuse that they have not come to terms with or on their own, attitudes of entitlement and things like that. Well, the older I got and the more I kept hearing these stories, I began realizing, there's a lot of themes here that match pitch with narcissism. And so you begin looking into that, and actually anger is kind of and part of the end game, but it's set up with a whole lot of precursors. And the more and more I would look into that, the more I would see the people that were most anger were the ones who just couldn't come out of their own self-absorption, control, and all of that. And so that's where I began going in that direction. I wrote my book on narcissism. I think it was 2004, 2005, something like that. So do the math. It's been that many years ago. And then, of course, YouTube came along, and I just kind of dove right in with that. And, I've got my channel over on YouTube, and it just kind of took off. We got lightning in a bottle. And I so thoroughly have enjoyed uploading all my information on that, and get feedback from our listeners and literally around the world. You're into all of that now, and you know how it works, and it's so gratifying. So that's kind of how I got into it on a professional level. On a personal level, I've dealt with individuals in my own personal life and folks that I know pretty well that have some narcissistic tendencies. And then I have to, the old saying is you have to examine yourself too. Well, what about me? I had a professor way back when that said, Les, you're not going to be able to guide anyone any further than where you yourself are able to go. And so that's a challenge. And the challenge is, well, as I'm talking with people about various trends and patterns that they may be dealing with, have I come to terms with that in my own personal life? And so I consider myself to be a fellow sojourner. I'm somebody that likes to read a lot and study, and I'm taking notes on a whole lot of different things. And hopefully, as I'm able to pass some of the stuff that I've learned along to other individuals, we can all be on the same team and move in the same direction together.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you've certainly hit YouTube by storm with millions of views over there. I love your content because it's so relatable. I mean, it does feel like you're talking to a friend. Like we could sit down and talk about narcissism. And then you're touching on something that I think is so important that starts to differentiate narcissistic individuals from healthy individuals, which is that self-reflective capacity.
Yeah,
And like, you're thinking, I want to be able to help other people, so I need to make sure I'm doing my own work. Like you are thinking, how can I improve?
right.
Something that narcissists do not do. So I wanted to focus specifically today on covert narcissists and the mind
Okay.
games that they play because I think this is such a huge topic. More and more of my clients are coming to me wanting to understand covert narcissism and being kind of frustrated with the information out there because we know about the grandiose narcissists. They're arrogant, they're selfish, they're like obviously all narcissists are entitled, but the grandiose narcissists are a little bit easier to see once you kind of get an eye for it, but the covert narcissists keep people reeling because they are victimized. They can be sullen, withdrawn, depressed, even seem really nice at times. So,
Yeah.
from your experience, what are the telltale signs that somebody is dealing with a covert narcissist?
Well, Chelsea, let's start just by reminding ourselves the definition of the word covert.
Yeah.
Covert means that it's veiled, or it's hidden, or it's not originally put out there for public consumption. And so, covert narcissists, as you're insinuating, can be really good at presenting themselves as just the guy or the girl next door that's friendly and pleasant and all, and they know the game, and they can present a pretty good front. At least as you're getting to know them. But then it goes back to the notion that what you see isn't necessarily what you get. Because over time, in their friendliness and pleasantness and all, you begin realizing I'm being played here. Now, it could be that it takes a while for that to show up. I mean, you can have many. I've had people that'll say, I've known this person for 10 years and we got along really well. And then something happened and it's like a whole different person showed up. And it's like, how did they keep that from me for so long? I mean, it can be that kind of a thing. Other times it's you get to know them and the covert narcissism begins to show itself a little bit more quickly or rapidly, and there's no rhyme or reason to it or no formula. Everybody's going to just play it out a little bit differently. And so when we talk about covert narcissism, we're talking about veil. But let's keep in mind when we're talking about narcissism, we're talking about people that have a really high need for control. They're defined by their selfishness. It's not like they have some selfishness in them. We all have that, unfortunately, but they're defined by it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned very poor insight. Instead of insight, they have an attitude of entitlement. There's what we refer to as alternate reality. They kind of have their own version of truth. And if you don't share the same version of truth, well, you know what that means. You're wrong and I'm right. And,
Yeah.
and so there's this this quiet excuse me, arrogance that begins to show up. Of course, low levels of empathy and high levels of exploitation. And so there are many different ways that the narcissism is going to show up. But again, typically it's not until you become somebody who is a behind the scenes observer before you're going to be able to realize it because these people are extremely image conscious. And it's very important for them to come across as being the nicest person you ever met or cooperative and all the rest. But over time, the indicators begin to show up, and it's like, wait a minute, things aren't quite as groovy as you're trying to make it out to be. What's going on here?
Right. And I'm so glad that you highlight that difference in how you're going to experience a covert narcissist when you're like inside the circle versus how you're going to experience them if you are outside of that circle. Because narcissists, particularly covert narcissists that we're talking about today, are so image conscious and very focused on in managing their image, they care a lot about what other people think of them. Like a lot more than most of us. Most of us healthy people want to be authentic. We want to know that our private actions and our public actions and our image matches.
Right.
Narcissists don't really care what they do in private as long as nobody else knows. So
Yeah. Yeah.
they're putting a lot of effort, attention into that. And something that I see survivors really get stuck in is because covert narcissists seem so nice, to other people. And then we get in our head and start thinking, well, they obviously have the quote capacity to be nice because
Yeah.
they're nice to other people, but they're not nice to me. So am I the problem? Is there something that I'm doing? But given that covert narcissists are actually selective about their niceness, what should we really take from that?
Well, and it feels a bit cynical to say this, but it's just the truth. Narcissists are transactional people. They're not relational people. And so when they engage with someone, in the back of their mind, there's always this question. Of course, to them, it may be somewhat subconscious. How are you going to service me? And how can my engagement with you keep me propped up to look good? And so they like to pick people who they can insist on their loyalty, and they want to make sure that you're on the team with them. And so in the original time that you get to know them, they can come across as being very helpful or interested in you. But over time, they begin to illustrate you're collecting data on me. And you're trying to figure out what my weak spots are so that they can exploit that, what your strong suits are so they can learn how to play around with that. And they come at you in this transactional mindset with an attitude of hidden entitlement. I want you to do things for me to make me look good, and as long as you and I are in sync on that, we're going to get along just great. But then if you start doing some things or showing some independence, and you more or less imply, well, I don't always think the same as you, rather than them thinking, well, then we can learn from each other. They don't think that way at all. But when
No.
you show your independence or your distinctions, it's like, why are you coming against me like this? And so
Yeah.
that entitlement sets them up to have this subtle attitude of victimization. You're just being argumentative, aren't you? Or I thought that you and I had a real agreement that we were going to do this, and what are you doing having your own separate thoughts and opinions and attitudes? And so it scares them when you show your distinction. I start with the assumption that variety is built into all of nature. And when we're talking, whether we're talking about the kind of birds or plants that are out there, or we're talking about human nature, variety is just simply built into all of existence. And as a result, when variety and differences show up, the healthy person, just as you're saying, is going to want to be open and transparent and say, well, I think this way, and I know you think differently. Let's break that down and see if we can glean from one another. The narcissist is like, no, I require your loyalty, which means I require your subordination, your conformity, and anything short of that means that you're defective and there's something
Right.
wrong with you. And again, going back to what you said, Chelsey, they can be so friendly and pleasant to some individuals, and then when you come across and say, "Well, I'm just not on the same page," then over time it's like, "Well, am I the problem? Is there
Yeah.
something wrong with me?" And over time, there's a whittling away effect that begins to happen. They're going to be so superimposing, sometimes not in an overt kind of way, but over time, just chipping away. Why did you think like that? Or I don't think I would have made that decision. Or no, you got that wrong. Or that's not what you told me yesterday. They'll have all these different comments
Mm.
to invalidate you and elevate themselves. All the while, it's their way of implying I need to stay in the superior position, and if it means that I have to put you in the inferior position, well, good. Thanks for playing that role for me because I need that.
Yes. And you said so many important things I want to come back to and highlight. One, that narcissists see relationships as transactional, not relational. And that just literally goes against everything and agreeable, which is the number one personality trait among survivors. Agreeable, empathetic people think of and the way we approach relationships. We think, oh, here's a person, it's going to be give and take, it's going to be balanced. I don't want to ask any more of them than I'm getting. Like we in our mind want to have a very collaborative, empathetic, open kind of relationship. And that's what we think we're getting with a narcissist. So I'm glad that you're highlighting the nuance of when things start to change, because that makes a lot of people start to question, is it me? Am I the problem? But what you're saying is, no, you can get along with a narcissist fairly well if you're going to do everything they want, when they want, how they want, at all times. And that's why people that are just on the peripheral can get along with a narcissist okay, because they're not really challenging them. They don't really need anything from them. It's when you actually start trying to be a human, you start trying to have your own thoughts and feelings and opinions, as you should be able to, that's when you're going to run into trouble with narcissists. And so, with that in mind, let's get into some of the mind games that narcissists play. And one that I've heard a lot is that, let's say you're at this point, you're realizing something is off about this person, something's off about this relationship. I'm trying to bring things up. I'm trying to perhaps bring up inconsistencies, betrayals that have happened in the relationship, thinking that, okay, we just need to communicate better or we need to be more collaborative. This is just a problem we can solve and then we can get back to how things work. But what I often see happening is that when you start to try to highlight what isn't working in a narcissistic relationship, that's when the narcissist comes back and scoffs at you and it's kind of like, I've never abused you. I didn't hit you. What kind of relationship do you think this is? Like, you think you're a victim? And they really start making you question yourself. So,
Yeah.
why do covert narcissists do things like that?
Well, first, let's keep in mind when you're in the position of saying, "Well, I just want to have a healthy relationship here." It's almost like it's automatic. Well, that means the narcissist is in the advantaged position because it's like, well, what I'll do is I'll pretend like I want to have a healthy relationship with you as well. And so you start with characteristics. You mentioned openness,
Hmm.
agreeable. Those are very healthy characteristics. Conscientiousness. You want to be somebody that can be counted upon. And so you go in thinking, well, that's what I bring to the equation. And then the fatal assumption is, therefore, I assume you'll want to do the same in reverse. And that's where you get tripped up. Because the narcissist, when they see you being conscientious and agreeable and helpful and all the rest and open, they're thinking, I can use this to my advantage. And they want to make sure that they can glean as much information about you as possible. And especially if they can catch you in your vulnerable moments where you've made a mistake, or let's suppose that you responded in a poor kind of way in a situation, and you think, I didn't really handle that very well. The healthy person can say, why don't we talk about that? And let's see what happened and what were you thinking? And then how did you respond? And how did it go south and all the rest? The narcissist, if you were to say, well, I don't feel like I handled myself very well, they're going to go straight into a judgment mode. Well, why didn't you pay attention to this? Or they already told you such and such, or you're always so disagreeable anyway. And then they're going to take your moments of vulnerability and openness and turn it against you. And in the end, guess who's the king or queen of the hill? I'm above you because, well, once again, you've showed that you're just this screw up. And so I'm going to have to step in and save you from your sorry self. And so they love to give unsolicited advice. They make it clear that you're going to be judged and criticized, sometimes subtly, like the rolling of the eyes. Other times, just straight up, just point blank. I can't believe you were so dumb. Things like that, and then just anything and everything in between. It's a game to them, as opposed to that relationship. And when we're playing the game, you have winners and losers, of course. And before you even show up, you're already the designated loser because
And you don't know
they
it.
you don't know that's been assigned to you exactly because they're the
Right.
designated winner. So I'm going to win, you're going to lose, and you might as well get used to it.
Yeah, that's very
Of course,
true.
they
That's how
won't
they,
say it because we go back and we say that because their intentions are veiled.
right. And that's where we get into this cycle too of what can I do? Can I learn? Like, I certainly relate to that in my relationship. I always thought we're one inside away from making this work. I mean, I don't shy away from hard work or personal development. It's kind of the space that I'm in for a reason. I've always wanted to be a therapist. I've always been interested in that. So I am more than willing to say, what did I do? What could I have done? And that is a healthy trait, but narcissists will take that and exploit it. And something else that you said as you were talking was how subtle this can be. And it makes me think of how, particularly with covert narcissists, they abuse through neglect a lot of times. Sometimes it's like I hear survivors and clients get really frustrated because they're like, they don't say anything overtly mean to me necessarily. They're just really cold. They can be critical. They are passive aggressive. There's lots of silent treatments. There's also withholding. But survivor, we diminish that as abuse. So, how can we start to frame that and look at that differently to realize neglect is abuse?
Good. Well, let's let's understand that one of the goals, part of the end game that the covert narcissist has, is they want to empty you of you, and they want to fill you with them. Now, you just pause right there, and we go to our word abuse. Um, Abuse just basically means that they're going to create some sort of injury toward you. They're damaging toward you. There's kind of a form of bullying that they'll do. But the covert person, rather than just doing the exploding, although they're capable of it, uh, they'll have all sorts of ways of shaming you and making you question yourself. As an example, do narcissists ever feel hurt? And the answer is, well, sure they do. And if we disagree with one another, you may think, well, I'm feeling hurt right now. But you'll notice that narcissists won't say, I'm struggling right now, and I'm trying to figure out how I can come to terms with this. They'll more or less imply you're hurting me. And
Yes.
notice the subtle difference. One is I want to share with you who I am so that you and I can have a good engagement with each other. The other is I'm a victim and you're the one who's perpetuating my victimhood. What's wrong with you? Why are you making my life miserable? And so the implication is if you sense something, if you perceive or feel something, then you're doing it in such a way that's making my life miserable. What's wrong with you now? And why do you keep doing this? And so, if you're in this relationship for a long period of time, you're going to walk away eventually thinking, I can't please this person. And so, if you're the kind of person that is pleasant and friendly, then it's like, well, what can I do then to make this better? I mentioned to you that I did a lot of anger workshops. One of the books that I wrote, I've got a couple of books on anger. The best one is called The Anger Trap. But after I wrote The Anger Trap, I wrote another one called When Pleasing You is Killing Me. And, and that's when the person who's having to deal with that controlling and angry individual, they can take too much responsibility for that other person's feelings. And so when that narcissistic individual implies you need to do better or you need to coordinate better with me, you'll have some of these appeasing individuals who will say, well, okay, well, I want to be agreeable and I don't want us to have friction all the time. And so you can go overboard in trying to help that person. But in doing so, you're playing right into the game. I'm diminishing you. I'm elevating myself. That's their game. And so it's like, I'll set aside my needs or my concerns at the moment so that I can keep you happy and so that I can keep you off my back. And as long as that pattern is going, they're thinking this is working out pretty well for me. When in fact it's eating away like an acid on the inside of you, and that's the abuse. And
Yeah.
then let's throw another term on top of that, and that's called trauma bonding. You begin to develop this traumatic or traumatized kind of feeling on the inside, and in doing so, you find yourself oddly attached to that person who's giving you the abusive kind of behaviors. It's like, what can I do to make them happy? Or, why is it that they're always down on my case? Okay, if I adjust here or if I try harder there, then maybe that'll help. And you get so caught up in your people pleasing or appeasement mindset that you lose yourself. And that's the goal that they have.
Yeah. I love that line. I was just writing that down of they want to empty you of you and fill you with them.
Right.
I love that line, and I think that that gives us a really good visual, and I feel that viscerally. I mean, some of the stuff that happens, a lot of the stuff that happens in narcissistic relationships, it's hard to put into words, but that really does it. And what I'm also imagining too is they're just constantly pushing you to take responsibility. Like a healthy relationship, you should be able to, imagine throwing a beach ball back and forth. Like here's my turn to talk and I take responsibility and then I throw it to you and then you talk and you take responsibility. That's again, that relational, mutual relationship that's healthy. But with a narcissist, as soon as you try to throw them the beach ball and say, well, hey, you did this, or hey, look at what you did here. They're like, no, immediately throw it back to you. I'm not taking it.
Yeah.
Don't want it. Like they're not playing.
Yeah, they love when you're vulnerable,
Yeah.
but they're not going to make themselves vulnerable. Or let's put it even a little bit more despicable. Sometimes they will say, "Yeah, I made a mistake." You know, my ex-wife used to do such and such, and it just used to get all over me. Now you're doing the same thing. Or I had somebody that I worked with, and every time I try to work on a project, they'd sabotage me, and I'm getting sick and tired of it. And so they might complain, and they might say, yes, I'm struggling with something, but then ultimately, well, it's always somebody else's fault. Poor pitiful me. And you never can pin them down. Uh, I'm one of these that if my wife calls me out, for example, if she says, Les, I didn't like the way you handled this, and could you have done this a little bit differently? Rather than saying, me, what about you? You weren't exactly the ideal person. What I can say is, okay, what are you noticing that I didn't notice? Or what are you picking up on? And I'm going to listen to you. And I'm not going to listen for the point of then explaining, well, here's where you're wrong. But I want to listen for the point of hearing, like, okay, you've given me some food for thought. And thank you for sharing that. And you have my assurance I'm going to put plenty of thought into it.
Yeah.
And narcissists cannot do that to save their life. It just will not happen.
Yep, they don't do that. And that goes right into the other tactic that I wanted to cover with you is triangulation. That's exactly what you're describing. And it's funny that you say that about, a partner saying, oh, my ex did this to me. Now you're doing this. My ex literally did that when I was with him. Within the first few weeks, he was telling me about past relationships and his family and how they don't support him this way. And his ex always judged him for this. And I'm so glad you're a therapist because you're not going to treat me like that. And how he had prayed for a therapist, which, didn't sit well with me, but I didn't know what I didn't know at that time, that was a big old red flag I should have ran from.
Well, there's kind of a compliment toward you,
Exactly. Yeah.
but it's got a twist to it.
Yeah, it's manipulative compliment. And that's what it gives you that icky feeling of, I didn't feel good, but I think you're giving me a compliment. So I think that's good. But actually, they're conditioning you to behave in the ways exactly that you've been talking about, of moving yourself out of you, essentially. And, oh, okay, so I need to be like this. I need to show up for them like this. They want this of me. And then your behavior slowly gets eroded and shifted and changed over time to be exactly what they want.
Chelsey, I have a term, I have a whole lot of terms, but I have a term that I call imperative thinking. Go back to your grammar school days and recall what an imperative sentence is. It's very declarative, black and white, cut and dried. And we have our imperative words: have to, must, can't, should, supposed to, ought to, got to, need to, had better. Anything that more or less says this is the way it is, get after it, let's do it. You'll notice that when you're dealing with a narcissist, there are lots of imperatives, and the covert narcissist will appeal to that very easily. Well, don't you think you could have done this instead, or you should have said this instead of that? And as time goes by, you start feeling like you're walking on eggshells because it's like this person always has an agenda for me. They're always playing that coulda, woulda, shoulda game with me. You should have done it this way. You can't do it like that. It has to be said this way. Well, when you're around my friends or my mother or my coworkers, you better not bring up these topics, or you have to be like this. And it's like, I can't keep up with all of this. But if you're the kind of person that really works hard to try to make things right, it's like, well, I'm going to try to remember as many of those as I can so that I can stay off your bad side. And again, it becomes more of a competitive kind of relationship at that point, as opposed to just a meeting of the mind and the meeting of the heart. They don't do it that way. There's always that agenda that's never far away.
Always present. It's either in the air or it's being directly said, but
Right.
there's a certain way that they want you to show up and a certain thing that they want from you.
Oh yeah.
And like we've been talking about, these tactics are so hidden, so they often become so confusing. It's not like you can hold gaslighting in your hand and say, "Here it is, like here's the bruise that shows that this happened to me." You can't. It's something that is really felt. So, how can somebody begin to really see these things, to see the truth, to be able to protect themselves? Is there something that a survivor can hold on to that reminds them, I am not the problem here?
Well, I think it's important to pull back and try to have as much of a sense of objectivity as you can. In various seminars that I've done through the years, I talk about the characteristics of the healthy personality, and one of the characteristics is empathy, of course. The empathic person is somebody that says, I really want to know you from your perspective. And so it can make you somebody that is tuned in and warm and engaging, and you're a real safe person. But unfortunately, when we look at the full definition of narcissism, empathy is not on their list of priorities. And so you want to have empathy, but you also want to have objectivity. And objectivity means that you just stick with the truth, you stick with the facts, even though it may not necessarily be what you want, but there it is. For example, when you think, I've been criticized so many times by this person, and I keep trying to explain myself and justify why I feel and think as I do, and it doesn't work. Then the empathic person can say, "Well, I need to understand more fully then why that person's feeling that way." Whereas the objective person says, "Something's going on here, and I need to know what that something is." And it could be that I'm dealing with somebody who's more troubled than they want to let on, and they're trying to make me the problem. What does that tell me? And so you have to kind of get into your objective mindset and try to set the emotion aside for a while. I call it mind over emotion. And it doesn't mean that your emotions don't matter, but your emotions aren't the full story. Your mind tells you a different story, and sometimes you have to set aside your emotional reactions and ask, well, what is my mind? What are the facts? What does the truth tell me? And then how am I going to make my adjustments based on that?
Yeah, I really like that, both empathy and objectivity, because I know for survivors, you're exactly right. We're immediately thinking, well, what am I doing to make them feel that way? How can I make them feel different? How can I make them feel better? And especially with the covert narcissist, well, with any narcissist, you never feel enough. But with the covert narcissist, there's always going to be more that you could do for them. Like they're always going to be the victim because they always want to be in that role. So there's never going to be enough sympathy, pity, help, resources, time, money that you can feed into them where they're ever going to say, oh, okay, now let's be balanced. That's just not going to happen.
One of the most difficult characteristics that a person who's on the receiving end of this kind of treatment has to learn is the characteristic of assertiveness. And I run that word assertive right in a parallel to the word boundaries. First of all, when we have boundaries, boundaries means that you have a pretty good definition of who you want to be. What kind of characteristics do I want to have predominate? And in fact, there would be times when I would ask people in my office, "Hey, give me a list of your most treasured internal characteristics," and they might come up with three or four. And it's like, let's keep going. Let's come up with 18 or 20. I want to be understanding. I want to be friendly, and all of that. The next question, though, is what am I going to do with myself when I know that the person on the other side of the equation doesn't appreciate those good things about me? And there's where we say, that's where my boundaries comes in. On your list of preferred ingredients, do you put in there, I want to be dishonest about myself? No, I don't want to be dishonest. Well, how many times have I been dishonest with this person? Because I don't want to tell them what I'm really thinking. Or
Yeah.
in my list of preferred ingredients, do I want to just collapse and go along to get along, even though I know it's not going to work out well? No, that's not on my preferred list. Well, what is? And so the assertive person says, well, I'm going to not only have my separate beliefs and my objectivity, I'm going to act it out. And I'm going to live into my own distinct characteristics. And so when the narcissist says, you're an embarrassment to me. And I don't like the way you handle yourself when you're around my family or my friends or whatever. And you're thinking, I've heard this lecture, 68 times, 168 times, and I just find it to not be true. Well, at some point, rather than thinking, well, I've got to plead my case. Okay, go back to that question. What are your preferred characteristics? Is pleading your case one of your preferred characteristics? No. So I'm thinking, well, when that narcissist says, well, you're just an embarrassment, you just didn't do anything right. At some point, my assertiveness may prompt me to say, I know that you have that interpretation, but I just don't see it that way. And so I'm just going to go ahead and let me be me. And if that's your interpretation, then so be it. And when they say, well, yeah, but you did this, this, and this. In assertiveness, it's like, I know that's what you think, but I guess you and I perceive me a little bit differently. And so you stand your ground, calm. I call it calm confidence. And then when they want to just keep whittling away and whittling away, that's them trying to eliminate you from being you. It's like, no, I'm comfortable with being me. And so you more or less get to the place of saying, I am what I am, and if that doesn't please you, I've got it figured out, and I've been around you long enough to know that's not going to happen. Then you may have whatever opinion you want of me, but in my assertiveness, I'm going to go ahead and give me permission to be who I am, and that's what we talk about when we talk about having healthy boundaries, where it's like I've got a good definition of who I am, and if you want to empty me of my healthy characteristics and cause me to have to play into your unhealthy games, I see it enough to where it's like, no, I choose not to play that anymore.
I really
I,
love that distinction.
I had this
Yeah.
one lady that came into my office, and she said, I could not wait to get in here to tell you this. She said, my husband was just criticizing me like crazy, like he always does. And what I did was what I wanted to do is I wanted to jump on his back and claw his eyes out. But she said, what I did, I remembered we were talking about this. And instead of doing that, I just said, you're entitled to your perceptions. I have a different perception. And she said, I wanted to have somebody there I could give a high five to, but I couldn't because I said it just right. And he just thought I was the stupidest person. And I just felt so good because I didn't get sucked in. So I gave her a high five. And it feels good when it's like, I don't have to go along with that person, and I don't have to defend myself because they're defensive enough for the both of us. And I'm just going to let me be me. And if you don't like that, maybe that's not my problem to have to solve.
I really love that distinction of not just who we want to be, because I think we think about that. Like healthy, agreeable people are like, I want to be kind, I want to be empathetic, I want to be reasonable. But what do you do when somebody doesn't respect that? And worse, if they're going to exploit those traits? I
Right.
love that step forward. Like, what am I going to do when I run into somebody who's, I have to become somebody I'm not, essentially, to
Yeah.
survive in that relationship?
Well, one of my favorite videos that I have on my YouTube channel is, I think it's entitled something like Your Ultimate Superpower when you're dealing with a narcissist. And the ultimate superpower is self-trust. I trust myself. And so if the narcissist comes along and more or less implies, I just think you're just one big bundle of mistakes waiting to just pour it all out. It's like, well, rather than me having to defer to that person's opinion, I know me well enough to know that, yeah, I'm capable of making mistakes, but I trust myself. I write myself when it's necessary. I have good values. I have good standards. My beliefs are what they are, and I like my beliefs. And then when you have that self-trust, you don't feel the need to make that other person agree with you, as much as that would be nice. It's like, no, I'm going to go ahead and anchor down in my belief in myself. Your concurrence would certainly be appreciated, but in the absence of it, I'm okay with me.
I agree. That is at the core of what I do, and helping clients in all my programs is how to build self trust, because that means you don't have to defend, engage, explain, personalize. You can sit back and go, "Yep, we can agree to disagree. I don't see it that way." All the things that you're saying, it's possible if you trust yourself.
Yeah.
So I love this. Thank you so much, Dr. Carter. This has been amazing. The last question I have that I ask all of my guests is, if somebody's listening and resonating, what is one thing they could do today to begin restoring their resilience?
Well, the number one thing is to individualize your growth. Many times we think that if I could just get this person over here to coordinate better with me, then I can grow. Or if I can get this person to acknowledge that I did something right, then I can move on. But at some point, it's like I'm going to be my own separate individual. Now, I'm one of these that believes that there are so many different ways that we can connect with each other, and when we promote interconnection, whether it's with humans or with nature or whatever it might be, we're better people because of it. But there simply are times when you recognize this is somebody that doesn't want to do a one another kind of a relationship. It's about them superimposing on me. And so let them be what they are. I'm going to individualize. And if they want to remain unhealthy, I'm going to see myself as distinct. And you move forward with the knowledge that says, if this person coordinates with me, that's wonderful. If they don't, I still have dignity and value. One of my little mantras, Dr. C, DRC, stands for dignity, respect, and civility. And I'm going to lean into that. And I'm going to make that part of my way of doing life. And if the other person can't appreciate it, then that's a shame. That's too bad. But I stand in my own dignity, and you can't take that away from me.
So powerful. I love that. Thank you so much. Where can people go to find you and connect with your content?
Well, a couple of places. We've got the YouTube channel that's still up and running. I'm not contributing new content to it anymore, but Surviving Narcissism. And then I have a web page that has a whole lot of stuff on there. It's called survivingnarcissism.tv. And the reason I had to put TV is because we have access to courses and videos and all of that. But I've got 300 or so articles on there as well, and quizzes and things like that. So, I mean, it's just a whole treasure trove of information out there that people can look into.
Amazing. And I'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you so much again.
Oh, Chelsea, thanks for what you're doing. You're a generation behind me, and I'm kind of fading now, and you're coming up. And we just guys like me, we want to pass the mantle to people like you and say, go get them.
Mhm.
And I've read your writing, and I so appreciate the way that you're engaging here today. Just keep doing what you're doing too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. My hope is to empower survivors any way we can. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carter, for breaking down the mind of a covert narcissist so we can see the truth of their abuse behind the innocent, victimized facade. If this episode helped you, please like and subscribe to the show. And as always, I want to remind you that no matter where you are on your healing journey, resilience can be restored. And we're going to keep building it together. I'll see you in the next episode.